I've been seeing a lot of pieces being made about Marvel dying, this is the end of times, Endgame was the best film ever created and nothing can ever compare, and ever since the next seasons and groups of TV shows or phases of Marvel is just dead in the water. Well, today, this video is a little different because I want to discuss why we feel that Marvel is sinking and why we see television shows like The Boys are thriving. Now, there's a few big things, and I think that Hollywood had a really rough year in 2023 of just not getting it. They're not getting what consumers are really enjoying, or perhaps what really made the Marvel scene really thrive with its fan base. The same thing of perhaps why Disney just doesn't understand why Star Wars was successful and essentially butting heads with the fan base of what they believe, or perhaps they are pandering to the audience of us essentially, but still just not quite nailing it. I think that what Hollywood just isn't getting, and I feel a lot of these videos go crazy and start saying things like they've gone woke, they've done this, they've done that. Well, there is a lot of agreement there. I think that most of it actually comes to characters. I think what we all love is truly characters, their arcs, their development, and seeing these characters really grow within their stories. It's not necessarily about any political agenda. It's not about anything that what we complain about and see in news articles. Nobody wants to see that in their films, and even if it is interlaced because that's the way a character is, all an audience, and I believe you watching this video, truly cares about is how a character learns, grows, and segues into an improvement of themselves, or even a de-evolution of themselves within their own story. I'm going to give a really strong example of where I think Marvel really succeeded, and where The Boys is why they're thriving. Now, when we talk about this, the things we're going to continue to discuss when we start off in the video here is that we did discuss here introducing why Hollywood doesn't get it. We're going to talk about these character arcs. We're going to talk about the stakes, the high risk of losing these characters, story, and the current reality of realism that an audience truly wants to see. Now, let's start here with Iron Man in terms of a character arc. A character such as Iron Man and Tony Stark is not necessarily the most popular character. Tony Stark was a drunk. He's a billionaire that's unrelatable to us because we don't have all that money. He's a genius, and not all of us, to be blunt, are geniuses in our own right. Even I'm not a genius. You're not a genius watching this video, and you happen to be, and comment down below and let us know if you're that genius watching these movies. But what found it so relatable was the fact that they found the right actor and the right script and the right director to lead the charge into what I believe is why Marvel was set up for so much success and why these films started to overpower the DC universe. When we see Tony Stark is an individual who has gone through a lot, who even at the start of the film is kind of relatable, talking to others who feel that they could be standoffish with. I can't really explain it perfectly, but I will admit as a kid, I was just mesmerized by his charisma in that Jeep. He just sounded a lot of fun. And because of that, it didn't matter what his status was, what he thought about politics, if he was a drunk or anything like that. Because of who he was as a character, and I was able to fall in love with this type of character, is why I started rooting for them. We all have flaws as individuals, but because we can start to root for an individual and see ourselves in them, even if they have flaws, is why we want to see them succeed. Now, there are a few missteps still, even with the Iron Man series. You know, we see him grow as a person from the billionaire that he was, going into finding the suit, to then having a bit of a redemption arc at the very end of saying, you know what, I'm going to become a better person, and I am Iron Man. There goes all my weapons. We're going to turn this around into something bigger and better than what we are. Now, because of this, we really see his evolution take place from movie to movie, and sometimes they take a step back, which is why Iron Man 3 for certain individuals doesn't hit, because we're kind of seeing a repeat of the same story. But also, as he learns to play well with others in the Avengers, we see him integrating more As we even hear from individuals such as Nick Fury that he's not a team player, but becomes a team player, that he's not the guy that he's going to sacrifice himself or make that play to slowly become that individual to make that play. We see him interweaved with a lot of other characters such as Captain America, who perhaps their stories are not necessarily as interesting, and this goes for the stake and the overarching plan, is that I don't believe that the first film with Captain America was actually that great of a film. I don't think that the Hulk first one was great, and the second one was just okay that they brought on with Edward Norton, and they kept pushing through. They were good, but they weren't perfect films, right? But what we had here was an overarching idea of bringing these individuals together. We did over time learn to fall in love with Captain America because we saw him go from his stoic character to opening up and being the team leader of the Marvel, well, the Avengers, essentially. Because he became a team leader of the Avengers, we saw him wrapped up with a lot of things such as Civil War. Civil War put him at odds with Tony Stark, and we saw a split and divide within the team, and we saw frictions. We saw that Captain America wasn't a perfect person, despite being propped up as one. We learned that Tony Stark still had a lot of flaws, as even at trying to identify himself between Iron Man and himself. We learned that as they built out their team, that even Thor as a person was trying to find himself of a reason why he existed in this world and whether or not he truly was a hero, and losing his ego with other people who had bigger egos. Because of this, there was an overarching plan of tying everyone together, and because of the stardom the actors had on screen, it created this overarching plan. Now, because we fell in love with these characters, they have been a bit torn apart with our new current heroes that we have. They downplay, unfortunately, from Disney, the value that these characters bring. And unfortunately, we see this happening with Disney Star Wars, where Luke Skywalker and other individuals are being downplayed. We should essentially always want to bring up the legacy heroes, but also pass on the torch in a respectful way, which is what they always say. But unfortunately, we don't always see that happening organically. We are kind of forced to say you need to love this character, rather than saying why you should love this character. We are shown why we should love Tony Stark, why we should love Captain America. And they didn't nail it the first time, but they slowly showed us, not through saying words that other characters are explaining this person is great, but through their actions. And through the actions of each of these characters and the stakes that they have, the high risk of potentially even losing them comes into play. Now, it's a reason why I'm very fearful of them bringing back some of these characters or trying to go back, is that I think it's like American Idol, where you can bring up the next star, but you need to explain what they bring to this universe. And as the universe is more fleshed out, this becomes a lot more difficult. Just like it does with Star Wars. When something is fleshed out, how do you pass on the torch and have Luke Skywalker say, this person deserves to have this torch passed to them, and here's the next line of stories? This has been rarely done in history. When we think about stories and everything that does happen, we see them happen more so in remakes, but passing that torch and having that legacy live on with new villains and raising the stakes is always very difficult, because it'll never ever really truly live up to what we saw, like for example with Thanos. Now, I think that they did hit it pretty well by having Spider-Man, who's a very relatable character, because it's the character that we all relate to, because Peter Parker always has struggles. He's always going to fit the bill of a character arc. Having high stakes, because there's an overarching plan of him always hiding his identity, but always trying to be a hero, but at a high risk of losing his family and friends. Just like Batman falls in this same category of a character arc of growing and having high stakes, of losing individuals such as Robin or anything. And spoiler alert, I mean, those are not really spoilers. I mean, these have been penciled into what we see in comics, and any story you're probably going to watch will probably have its own take. So don't worry too much about that. But it's a high risk, and it's an overall story that we're looking to learn from. Stories is what we relate to as kids when we look at fairy tales, and fairy tales, when we watch them and learn from them as kids, should always be respected, because that's the first story that we were heard growing up, but we should always evolve those stories a bit more. I would say the mistake of comparing Marvels versus The Boys, and I feel like it took us a little while to get here, because The Boys is thriving, is because it's pushing the character arc, stakes, high risk, and story. So the reason why it took us so long to get here is because I needed to explain these earlier concepts. The Boys is truly thriving now because of the high risk of losing individual characters. We see characters who are making constant mistakes all over the place. The heroes aren't necessarily the heroes that we dream of. They're not perfect individuals like a Captain America. They're not perfect individuals like a Superman, which is why Superman can always be so hard to write for. But we have an example of what Homelander is in this version of being a scary, evil like Superman, which makes the story that much richer and interesting because it goes into a darker tone. Now, at some point, we're all going to get tired of this darker tone and then feel it as more of a gimmick. And I hope that The Boys doesn't make this mistake of just falling into this path of shock factor, that they continue to thrive by telling a great story with a character that grows or doesn't grow or becomes defeated and loses everything and maybe learns at the very end that they should or should not have done something. When we are introduced, let's go back to what made The Boys so interesting, is we had a character established such as Huey. It felt very much like Shaun of the Dead, somebody who is very mundane, very boring in a world with superheroes. And from my understanding, they actually wanted Simon Pegg for this role, but they actually casted him for the dad because of his age. And with Huey, we instantly gravitate towards him, and he has something ripped away from him immediately. And that removal of that thing from him, we all experience loss, and we all instantly feel for him. And it happened from a superhero, which puts the stakes at a very high point, meaning how does he overcome this and how does he grow as a character? Or how doesn't he grow as a character in this world? And it really sets that stage. Now, one thing that I fear for the show as it keeps going, as we see some of their arcs conclude, of characters starting to run into the problem of their arcs don't end, their story doesn't end, their journey doesn't end. Unfortunately, for every great story, a story must end. And we must see a character either meet their end, or of course, in Batman, as I say, live long enough to see themselves become the villain. The Boys is actually, oddly enough, hitting on some political agendas. And I know a lot of people don't like that, but I really don't care one way or the other if a movie, TV show, or media has some sort of political influence, as long as it has a good story with interesting characters that have flaws. Or if they don't have flaws, they have flaws later exposed of why they need to be a better person. I think the overall story, no matter what political view you have, is that we should always strive to become better people and that we should try to be better for the world around us. I think in every which way form, if you look at things on both extremes, that's what everyone's looking for. And this is my belief of why Marvel is really struggling and why Hollywood just doesn't understand this and the current reality of what an audience truly wants to see. I know that we all want to just see a film with a great story and not necessarily cookie cutter things because we want to see it because it's greed or getting a high box office, and perhaps seeing actors put into roles that they probably don't necessarily fit, or giving a no-name a chance to really prove themselves in a story with a nice character arc and journey that fits in the overarching plan that we're looking for. I really fear for the future of cinema, especially in 2023, which is why I want to talk in another video and my feelings why movies in 2023 literally suck. But in 2024, as we start growing this channel and start really talking about them, why I feel confident that things are going to change and why we feel attachment further into these characters and why I'm excited about doing this channel. Guys, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate all of you guys for watching. I appreciate the fact that you waited so long for me to get to the point why The Boys is thriving. It's why in the second part of the title, but why it's so important that you watch the whole video to get the overall themes and arc. Thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.